Well, daybreak is breaking this morning. Declare state of emergency on security now. 48 CSOs tasked Tinubu on state of insecurity. Says 2,423 killed violently since Tinubu assumed office. Bandits killed 2 Ekiti traditional rulers, and that's on page 2. You also have Wike assures that they can deliver on ambitious projects.
Okay, let's go to the Nigerian pilot. And the headline there says, over 30 kidnappers killed in Kaduna. No fewer than 30 kidnappers on 15 motorcycles have been killed in Kaduna. That's talking about the riders now. They were killed in an airstrike along Kwega-Kampanindoka axis in Briningwari local government area. Nigerian Air Force says strike followed intelligence received on movement of criminals along the axis and reveals that same syndicate was responsible for ambush on troops at Kwanan Mutunwa on January 27. All of that you can find on page 8.
This Nigeria is looking at this morning. 45 terrorists wiped out in Kaduna military airstrike. Army hands over 35 rescued kidnapped victims to Governor Rada. You also want to look at that story. CBN injects additional $500 million to clear forex backlog on page 19.
And the People's Daily talks about a completely different story, although related to insecurity. Horror in Kaduna. Islamic cleric murdered, genitals cut off, 24 hours to wedding. And that's on page 5 of that paper. Of course, there are pictures of the picture stories underneath, talking about the squatter settlements allegedly serving as a base for criminal elements under a bridge in Wuse area of Abuja. And the coordinator of the FCT Joint Task Force also inspecting that area.
All right, let's look at daily asset. Kaduna NAF airstrike kills 30 terrorists on 15 motorcycles. Residents flee as herdsmen kill 8 in Benue. You also want to see that articles, former spokesman Daniel Bwala meets Tinubu in Paris.
To the Daily Sun now. Students abroad groan as FX rate rises to 1,420 naira to the dollar. Pound sterling rate hits 1,775 naira, and the CBN releases additional $500 million to settle FX liabilities. Ibadan explosion. Makinde accuses Atiku of not identifying with Oyo people as Obi visits, commiserates with governor and victims. That's on page 26.
And now let's look at the front page of the Daily Times. CBN injects $500 million to clear forex backlog as naira sinks to 1,455 naira per dollar. Government urged to sell moribund assets to raise needed FX. And you just see above that, Nigeria records 18% national identity attacks in 2023 report.
To the Nigerian News Direct now, Forex backlog. CBN pumps additional $500 million. That's on page 21. And of course, you see right underneath the picture story there, 4 days after kidnap, Lagos PDP chairman regains freedom.
The Nigerian Express looks at life after a Ibadan explosion by victims, and that's the lead story there. You also want to look at that bad weather. NCAA wants pilots, airlines, and that's another story, bottom page.
National Star, or the new National Star now, says fuel subsidy. NNPC remitted zero allocation to Federation account in 2022. Spent 2.9 trillion on staff emoluments, 3.3 trillion on subsidy in 12 months. Below the picture story, you also see that story about CBN releasing $500 million to clear verifiable forex liabilities.
First News is looking at that story. First, let's look at that. Impeached Ogun Speaker Oluomo, 2 others arraigned over 2.5 billion naira. Fraud walks out on Assembly's probe panel, but CBN gives Forex market fresh $500 million lifeline as the lead story there. Mali, Burkina Faso send ECOWAS formal notice of withdrawal as Nigeria expresses concern, says we will remain open for engagement.
Now to the leadership newspapers, tells us on its front page, tenure limit, bank insurance chiefs dodge regulatory acts, create holding companies to retain power, influence. They're building supermen, not institutions. That's according to experts. It's to expand operations and revenue streams. All of that on page 4 of the leadership newspaper. And the paper also says, Supreme Court verdict, no deal with presidency. That's quoting the governor of Kano State.
And there'll be by-run elections on Saturday in 26 states, according to INEC as well. But New Telegraph looks at Southern Kaduna Christian leader to Tinubu declares state of emergency on insecurity to restore law order, and that's the lead story. And bottom page takes you to INEC there, says 4.6 million to vote in February 3rd by-elections. Global poll, we will ensure PDP retains a dome of tongue, and that's on page 2 and 26.
Oh, the Nigerian Tribune. Jimoh Ibrahim takes Tinubu's renewed hope message to 203 Ondo wards. That's the main headline there, but if you look just above the masthead, suspected kidnappers kill 2 traditional rulers in Ekiti. That's on page 25.
And Blueprint is printing away on terrorism war this morning. Dominant operatives kill 30 bandits, rescue 40 abductees. Castina, Abuja residents celebrate Hill development. FCT police boss kidnaps syndicate, sets victims free. You also want to look at that minimum wage, federal government workers, and other stories on the front page lined up there. And Business Day this morning is looking at the big story, stock market scene losing steam as fund managers mulls sales there. But insecurity, mango crisis threatens 24,000 trucks of maize supply, and Business Day Solid Minerals Conference holds today. But that's another story entirely on their own front page. But Naira continues free fall despite CBN's $3.82 billion backlog clearance. So let's come back to our reviewers this morning. I'll come to you largely, Majid. Declare a state of emergency. I mean, 48 CSOs going at it, especially with what's been happening.
On insecurity?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's a no-brainer. Nigeria itself is in an emergency situation, and that is why we've been calling for alternative measures, something new in the approach to tackling Nigeria's heightening insecurity, because we used to describe it as heightened, but it's gone beyond heightened, so it's heightening, is on an upward trajectory, and so a lot needs to be done. So asking for a declaration of emergency is a no-brainer. Nigeria is at war with itself on all fronts, and so when you're at war, it's an emergency situation, and so you need to deploy all within your arsenals of national defense and national security to restore normalcy. And the problem is we do not see that urgency on the part of the political leadership to rein in the current security challenge in Nigeria and bring it under control. We do not see that urgency. We see a lot of, maybe let's say lack of, interest in bringing about normalcy because, of course, they are well protected by the state. They do not actually feel the ravages of insecurity as the ordinary citizens are feeling it. And so we need to see them do more in this regard. And that brings me back to the issue I've always canvassed on this program and elsewhere, that when a nation is at war, such as we are in Nigeria, the short-term measure that should be deployed is a form of what you can call a limited civilian armament program that would enhance the self-defense capabilities of Nigerians that have been left unprotected because of the inadequacy of the current security infrastructure. Because you cannot allow citizens to continue to live in double jeopardy where you can't protect them and they are not allowed to protect themselves. Something has to be done about this. And if you look at the headlines, most people are suggesting the constitution of vigilante groups. Some people are talking about state police. A lot of, suggestions have been made in this regard, which suggests clearly that there is a need to retreat and think outside of the box in tackling insecurity. So I think that something needs to be done in this regard. We need to enhance the self-defense capabilities of citizens in these emergency times.
Dr. Maho, we seen headlines this morning about bandits killing 2 traditional rulers in Ekiti State. And it drew my mind to something somebody said some years ago, that if you don't deal with the level of criminality that we were seeing then, that it will embolden a lot more people and kidnapping traditional rulers who have been accused recently of not being part of the efforts to rein in the insecurity. What's your take?
Let me continue the trajectory of what you are saying and continue from where Moji stopped. The two traditional rulers have been accused, like you said, of not being part of, proffering solution to the security situation in the country. And the irony of that story is that those two traditional rulers were coming from a security meeting where they met with other traditional rulers to proffer solution to the insecurity in parts of Ekiti State. And they became victims of the general state of insecurity in the country. In line with what Mojid has said, when you look at the security architecture in the country, what comes to my mind is a quote by Albert Einstein, that you don't solve a problem with the same level of thinking that got you into that problem in the first place. There has to be a higher level of thinking. You have to think differently, or some people will say think outside the box. Because to use the same method of thinking and expecting a different result is classical definition of madness. Look at our security architecture, like you said. There was a time I said, look, we are trying to fight a 21st century crime with a colonial security architecture. I've had the privilege of, having a discussion with those in the security service, just to ask them, look, what do you think we can do? What can we do better? What are we doing that we are not doing? Mr. President is in France, more like Emperor Nero fiddling while Rome burns. He can't be bothered. He is not, there are two problems bedeviling the country as at present, which has practically sent the citizens of this country into a state of confusion. You don't know what to do. And when I was having a discussion, at times when we have this discussion and you ask yourself, what is the option? What is the alternative? Is it to just pack up and leave the country? Is a thought that has never come to me before. And anybody that I know that decide to take that line of action, I query it. But of recent, I begin to think of it on the grounds that, look, even if it is just to stay alive, not for economic reasons, just to stay alive by leaving this country is an achievement. Because when you look at all the front pages of the paper today, there is no way that you won't see headline about insecurity, whether in Abuja, whether there is, NAF airstrike killed 30 terrorists in Kaduna. Let me just say this. When you see stories like that, NAF strike is always killing terrorists. Are these terrorists, I've watched Game of Thrones, are they army of the dead? It seems as if the more you kill them, the more they grow in numbers. So what is happening?
Alternative results, some people would also say perhaps this trip to France is for the president to look outside the box and, get security, perhaps intervention. Because we did see some news back then, early December, early January, that France was offering to, wade in and help Nigeria with the insecurity problem. But one would say, how far so far?
How far so far is a question we need to ask ourselves. Nigeria have been confronted with this insecurity problem since this democratic era. How far so far will be? How far has France helped, Francophone countries in the West African sub-region that are confronted with this same problem?
Who just exited ECOWAS?
They've not done. And in exiting ECOWAS, it is like a multiplication of the security challenges we are going to face as a country. Because somebody who did the analysis simply said, look, in terms of land mass, 50% of ECOWAS is gone. In terms of security challenge, Niger was a buffer. In terms of security challenge, Mali Burkina Faso were equally a buffer in proffering solution to our own internal contradiction and security challenges. So once we were not able to manage, especially Niger, manage the political situation in that country to our benefit, but rather we are
Thank you for watching. If you're new to this channel, consider subscribing so you won't miss out any of our latest
Macron
videos.
of France. This is the outcome.